Hello and welcome to another character creation guide, but this time not for anime. I know I've been away for a while, I do this. Also the events in the world have left me a bit, not exactly disposed to doing things, but I'm bored, I want to do something, so I think we will start the character creation guide again. But I haven't played anime in quite a while. Unfortunately the game of anime I was playing ended, mostly due to burnout on myself, playing too many games at once as always, the GM's curse I say. But yes. But right now what I am playing is a 20th anniversary edition vampire game. Alongside a 20th anniversary made game. They're set in the same world, but hey, let's not talk about my insanities at the moment. So, we will be going through character creation guide for Vampire the Masquerade. Unlike with my anime guide, where it was solely mechanical, because many of the mechanics of anime can be detached from their world, somewhat easily. There are some things that kind of stick there. Vampire's mechanics heavily dictate its world, as well as its world heavily dictating its mechanics. It's a good example of that. So, what I'm going to go over very quickly is the basic setting. Vampire the Masquerade, for those unaware, takes place in the world of darkness, a setting where monsters are real and humans are none the wiser. You know, your classic scary, evil thing that hides in the shadows and rules the world from the, I don't say precipices, but that's not a word that's used there. No, instead, rules the world from the shadows. One of these people is the vampires. In this setting, they are descendants of Cain. That Cain, yes, C-A-I-N-E, I think. Not Cain from Legacy of Cain, although the world would be equally as fucked then. By the way, they are descendants of Cain after Cain was cursed by God to walk the earth forever and have superpowers and immortality and a bunch of other bullshit. God may have been sleeping on the John on that one. But regardless, you play one of the descendants of Cain, one of the 13th generation, 13 steps removed, and it takes place in the Modern Knights, where the Camarilla, the Sabbat, and the Anarchs are all more or less vying for control with each other, while also vying for control within each other. It's a very political and roleplay heavy system with a lot of themes of like being human, being a monster, but it's also a system that allows you to feel very powerful if you want. So today we will be going over the basics for character creation in this system. It's a very simple system. It's a storyteller for those who are familiar, although those who are familiar with storyteller probably know how simple the character creation is. So why are you here? Thanks for watching my video, but are you just bored? I assume so. I am. So we'll scroll past all of the text about things, about what's a player character, all that stuff. I assume if you are here, we are familiar enough with what characters are for role-playing games, especially if you are here because of my anime series. So, first off, we start with this handy little guide on character creation that is on page 88. Very handy, very useful. Now, in Vampire the Masquerade, you don't roll for your stats. In fact, everything in this game, if I may show you, is based off of dots. It's the famous dot system. If anyone's played Exalted, it's based off of this. Or even Cthulhu Punk, I believe, is similar in a way. For anyone that knows that reference, dear lord, respect. But yeah, this is my actual Rose City by Night game that we're currently playing through. This is just a test CC that I have created for the purpose of this video. So, as you can see, you have 9 attributes. Each one starts at 1. Now, 1 is the lowest an attribute can ever get in this game, and it's kind of the equivalent of a 3 in D&D. It's not even human for the most part. It's like very low intelligence. Like, yes, you are still technically human in that thing, but you are just, like, if you have 1 in wits, you are very, very slow on the uptake. Like, possibly have been sheltered to the point where you really couldn't live in the real world. 1 intelligence, possible brain damage, like genuine possible brain damage. 1 perception, you might be blind in 1 eye. That sort of thing. Now, they all start at 1. But, you know, that's just the explanation. Before we even get to pick our stats and all those things, we go for our clan, nature, and demeanor, and a concept. Concept is not required if you have a solid idea of what you want to play already. It's merely to help people who don't. There are a list of sample ones, but you can be anything from the social hostess to the sycophant insane person. think they might be the same thing, actually. But either way, so the first and the most important of the things we must decide is our clan. Now, there are 13 major clans in Vampire the Masquerade, as well as a bunch of bloodlines that we won't go into. I might make a separate video just explaining bloodlines for those who want to use them in character creation. They're very simple, though. Your clan determines a couple things. One, your weakness as a vampire. Every one of the 13 clans has a different weakness that comes from their progenitor, which is known as their antediluvian. And they're all different. For instance, I'll take 3 random clans and give you an example. The Ventru's clan weakness is that they have to feed from very specific people or things. Usually this and if they feed from anything that isn't their preferred thing, preferred meal, I guess is the way you could put it, they will physically vomit up the blood they drink. They can't down it. So for instance, some Ventru, it might be, I only drink the blood of the rich, because they're kind of the blue bloods of the setting. In fact, I believe that is their derogatory nickname amongst the other clans, is the blue bloods. But it could be even more specific. It could be, I can only drink the blood of someone with red hair. Or, if you're supremely fucked up, I can only drink the blood of children, which is considered a big no-no in this world because, well, like the vampire myth, the kiss, as they call it, a somewhat sexual act for both involved. It's like the ultimate pleasure. So, child, you can see where that's going. But that's the Ventru. They can have their clan weaknesses. Not the worst, but it's also not the best. Makes it hard to feed. Then there are people like the Nosferatu, who their clan weakness is that they are physically repulsive. Like, physically so. They are inhumanly ugly to the point where it's obvious they're a vampire. And in this setting, there's a thing called the Masquerade, a la Vampire the Masquerade. Years ago, vampires were very open. Like, when I mean years ago, I mean like 13th, 12th century years ago. Vampires were very open about their ruling of the world. They weren't like, going around ruling with an iron fist. Mostly because there were other supernaturals trying to do the same. When everyone's a shit show, it's a shit show. But they were pretty open about it until eventually humans kind of got sick of their shit and all together collectively started killing vampires en masse, because as much as they're horrifically powerful and could, like the very most powerful of them can destroy the world, they are still, they have weaknesses, and if you can figure these weaknesses out, you can exploit them real bad. So the vampires realized we must make a masquerade. We must pretend to be human and rule from the shadows. And so that's how it's been for a very, very long time. Until the Sabbat showed up and we're basically like, nah, fuck that. We're monsters. Let's kill everyone. Either way. Because of that, the Nosferatu's weakness is that they are obviously inhuman. They're obviously not human. Like, they just cannot pass. It's not even like could you mistake them for a burn victim or an extremely ugly person? It's like, no, because they look like the aftermath of Chernobyl. Like, they have growths in their head, or they stink of death, or just like, or maybe they just have a really eerie presence to them. Like, they look almost normal, but no one around them can be around them for very long because their presence is just horrific. So they tend to skulk around in the shadows, and they're also the informants of the Camarilla, or Camarilla. And finally, we'll take the Malkavians, who are my personal favorite clan, and possibly what I'll make for you guys today. Clan is really a personal preference thing and all that, but the weakness for the Malkavians is that they're all insane. And when I mean insane, I don't mean like ha 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 jumping off the walls batshit crazy. I mean like they can be anything from like what's known as a fish milk, which is a term referring to Malkavians who are that batshit crazy, don't really make much sense. It's kind of a derogatory term though, because it basically refers to a Malkavian that never has to suffer in character due to their illness, because their illness is something like every time they see a fish, they pick it up and keep it until it rots, and then they find a new fish, right? You don't really get into trouble for that. You're just a weird guy that holds a fish. But it is funny. But it can be things like that, to straight up OCD, to being a sociopath or a psychopath, or any of the things. Now, their downside comes with an upside. Because of this, their madness is inherently made by something called the Malkavian Madness Network. which is a thing that connects all Malkavians together subconsciously. They can't actively use this really, but when you tell one Malkavian something, in some way, all Malkavians know it, because they're all connected. And all Malkavians are slightly prophetic because of this. They know things they shouldn't, see things they shouldn't. Just the way they are, really. They're known as the seers, or the crazies if you're an asshole. And that's like some of the examples of the different weaknesses of the different clans. They're all very different from each other, and they're all very unique. The other thing a clan determines is your disciplines. There are many more than 13. Each clan gets 3, but they're not all unique. Each clan does usually get like one discipline they're well known for, even if it's not unique to them, and a couple clans have completely unique disciplines that are only really theirs. Now, anyone can learn any discipline as long as they have a teacher willing to teach it. That's where the hard part comes in. A lot of these clans are secretive and conniving, so they don't want to teach the other clans their powers. For this, because we need to determine clan, I will say we are going to play as a... We will play as a La Sombra. Ignore the really bad La Sombra art. So, La Sombras. They are not part of the Camarilla. They're part of the Sabbat, which is kind of the... It's essentially a... They basically went to the Camarilla, fuck you, we want to be monsters and kill every human we see. And the Camarilla was, no, we don't want that. And so they've been at war ever since. There's other much bigger reasons they dislike each other, but for the most part, that's kind of the big thing. So these guys are part of the leaders of it. There's 2 leaders, the Zamitzi and the La Sombra. They're the 2 big leaders, as you can see by the Sombra's clan symbol being a crown. So this is like a little description of the La Sombra. Again, not really important what we're going for here. What we're going for is what we want our character to be. So we are a La Sombra. So we'll write that into the character sheet as our clan. So we're La Sombra. Next up, we pick our nature and demeanor. These are how we act and how we actually are. So what we present ourselves as and what we really feel deep down. Now, there's a large list of natures and demeanors in the game. And I recommend you could technically make your own, but it is better to just pick because of what they are for. Natures and demeanors are more or less used to determine... We'll go down to it. They are used to determine you gaining back what is known as willpower points. Willpower is a stat in this game. You gain a number of temporary willpower points equal to your maximum willpower, your actual willpower. And these can be used to re-roll things. They're used to cast some of your vampiric magics. And they can also just be used for like a myriad of things. Re-rolling, exploding certain tens, using magic, waking up out of what's known as torpor, which is like a deep sleep that you go into if you get too injured. You know, all of these things this willpower can be used for. And so it's a useful resource, and it does get replenished at the end of every session. But that's not useful when you're out of it in session. It may be in the end of every night if you get a full night's rest, but most storytellers will take that to mean just the end of every session, so it's fair. But yeah, so like, you know, maybe you want to play into your nature to gain a willpower point back because you need one and it would help. And there are many of them. And so I'm thinking, personally, for this character, I'm thinking of going for like the classic blue-blooded aristocrat, right? Like talky, very sort of like I am a leader. I think autocrat for nature is an excellent choice actually for that. So you know, she at heart she wants to be in charge. She just really wants to be in charge. And we'll go for a female for this one as the images one. She really wants to be in charge. She wants that power over people. But what she presents herself as is let's see, what could be good for this character? I've got an idea in my head for her already. You know, this sort of like she's as you can see, there are a lot of these options. You know, you can be a rebel, a rogue, a sociopath. Um, yeah, let's go visionary. Actually, I like this. She pretends. I'm liking this. Like she just wants power. That's all she wants. It's all she'll ever want. She's an autocrat, right? Her nature is that she wants power and wants to control. But she acts like a visionary who's only doing this for a future she can see. The future is her ruling, but she ain't gonna tell you that. So that's step one done. We are La Sombra, who basically wants power and is willing to do anything for it, even lie about being a visionary. So that's the first part done. Don't worry, we're most of the way there next. So after this, we determine attributes. Now, I have my own homebrew version of doing this, but we'll go by the base book because not all storytellers are homebrewers. Now, you pick a category, 3 categories, and so there are 3 categories. Sorry, just up, and they are your physical traits, social traits, and mental traits. And you pick a primary, secondary, and tertiary version for them. So the primary one gets 7 points to spend on a 1-to-1 basis with everything starting at 1. The secondary category, gets 5, and the tertiary gets 3. Now, for me, I think the tertiary category for this lady is physical stats. She is not a particularly physically fraught person, so I'll put 1 in each of them. Now I can explain what each of the dots mean. As I stated, a 1 is the absolute bare minimum to have to exist as a person. You can have a 0 in a stat, but it means that you are supernaturally bad at that thing. A 0 appearance for the Nosferatu is Nosferatu has 0 appearance, for instance. Gives you an idea of how bad a 0 is. A 2 is the human average. And I mean complete human average. You are the normal person, so she's physically average. A 3 is you are above average, a professional is kind of the way the book puts it. You know, this would be like, a 3 strength would be like a professional weightlifter or even a professional boxer. A 3 in charisma would be like, you know, not your high class CEO necessarily, but you know, like a corporate business leader. A 4 is that you are like a leader in that field. So like an Olympian would be 3 dexterity. A 4 dexterity, I mean. A 4 in manipulation would be like, well, a very high-class politician. So like someone at, like, let's take our modern politics here, someone at like Donald Trump's side who got there in general, frankly, would have a 4 manipulation. Or a 4 appearance would be a runway model. A 5 is the absolute peak of humanity. And when I mean peak of humanity, I mean peak for all time. A 5 intelligence is Albert Einstein. A 5 appearance is like Marilyn Monroe and stuff like that. People who, like, basically everyone says, yeah, they're beautiful. 5 strength is like you are the world's strongest man, probably, or at least in the contention for it. That sort of stuff. Like, you are the best at this thing you can ever be. So, moving on to the social stats, I think that will be where our 7 points go. So as you can see, you assign where the points go. So I put 3 for the physical, and we'll go 7 for social. So I think this lady is very manipulative. So I'm going to spend 3 of those points, leaving me 4 left, on manipulation. I think she's rather beautiful. So spend 2 of them to go up to 3, leaving me 2 more for manipulation, which means, you know, for charisma, meaning she is a leader. She can lead people when required. She isn't like a terrible leader, but she's better at manipulating people to do what she wants than she is at actually leading them. And she also is quite beautiful. And finally, our 5 points can be in mental. So I think, so wit is sort of your streetwise kind of. It's like your quick thinking. I think she's good at it, but not great. She's average. I think she's very intelligent though. So we've spent 1, got 4. So I think we'll spend 3 there, 2 there, and 2 in perception. Your perception being not only your like ability to pick things up quickly, but also your physical perception, being able to see. So our stats are done, and we have this rather, like, interesting character. She's physically very average, but socially she's a bit of a prodigy, and mentally she's not a slack either. She's rather intelligent, very perceptive. Could maybe do with brushing up on her street smarts a bit, but she's never really lived in poverty or anything like that. So, next up are abilities. Now, these work the exact same way as your attributes do. You get 3 sets of points to spend amongst 3 you have. So, 13 is your primary, 9 is your secondary, 5 is your tertiary. Now, the only difference here is that no ability may be higher than 3 at this stage. So, a 1 in a skill is you're a novice, a complete novice. A 0 in it means you're not even trained, and for any knowledge skills, it basically means you can't roll it because you don't know anything about it. For a lot of the physical skills, you can maybe get away with it, but even then, as a storyteller, I sometimes say you just cannot do this thing. And the 3 categories for this are talents, skills, and knowledges. Talents are your things like brawling, alertness, awareness, which are your perception of the world around you, athletics. It's like physical thing that you pick up as you go through life. You don't really learn these; they just come to you. Intimidating people, streetwise, subterfuge, which is the art of lying, more or less. Skills are things you can be taught, so like stealth, survival, performance, melee, larceny, firearms, etiquette, all that sort of stuff. Martial arts, I believe, is a skill, not a talent. Brawl is like untrained, like just being a good boxer almost. Martial arts is its own separate thing that isn't really covered in this system. It's covered in a different system called a different game called Mage. Same system, very transferable. And knowledges are exactly as they sound. They're knowledges. They're what you know. Now, I think our character here is primarily good at knowledges. I think she is a highly educated woman. So 13 points to spread amongst here. So I think she's got a college degree. I think she's definitely had a college degree. So I think academics 3, which is what that represents. And I think it was in business finance. So I think she has a 2 in finance. I think she had like a lot of academical studies and stuff like that, but primarily it was mostly finance, and she's picked it up well. Let's say she's a bit of an older vampire, so she's picked up the politics of the land. So so far we've spent 7 points. She knows how to use a computer, a smartphone at the very least, which is what the first dot in a thing represents. The second dot represents that you are somewhat trained in it. The third dot represents professional quality in it, so you could live off of it. 4 is you're an expert of your field, and 5 is you're a leader in your field. You are, like the 5, for instance, in the book is described as basically being Steve Jobs. Not completely accurate, but hey, I won't get into how much of a prick he is. So, I also think she's very good at occult. Again, being a vampire, a la Sombra especially, they're very occultish. I think she's picked up occult over the years, so let's count how many we have now. So 3, 6, 9, 11, so we have 2 points left over. I think she has 1 point in law. Maybe picked it up in her like bachelor's degree, sort of like she did finance and law as her degrees. And finally, a little bit in science. She had an interest in it when she was younger. So next up, we pick our second category, the secondary one, which I'm going to say is talent. That gives us 9 points to spend there. So she's very good at lying. So we've got 6 points left over. She's amazing at lying. She's picked up how to live on the streets over the years. She's not an idiot. I think she's okay at leadership. She's doing it. She's led before. She's not an idiot. She's not completely blind around her. She knows the situations around her. She can't fight. I think now empathy in this game is not what you think it is. It is not necessarily, how well could you empathize? It also can represent how well can you manipulate those emotions of empathy and stuff like that. So I think she can do it. She kind of maybe doesn't understand empathy as well as she should, so she can't do it well, but she knows how to. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I think a point in intimidation is always good. So next up, we have 5 points for our final skill. So let's put 2 into craft. No, into drive. She knows how to drive a car relatively well. Maybe she took theater as a thing. Maybe she was a bit of a theater kid in her secondary schooling or her college years. She just liked it. So she knows a bit about that. Let's say when she was younger, she used to sneak out of her parents' house. Let's say she's like only about 5 years old as a vampire, maybe 25 in total. So yeah, she definitely used to sneak out of her parents' house once in a while, and she definitely knows etiquette. She knows how to handle herself in court. She's a socialite. She knows how to be the how to what's the word? How to talk to people without having them want to rip your throat out in this world. So that is the attributes done. Again, very simple. Forgot something. So I don't know if this is the exact way it's done, but it's the only thing I've ever seen. I'm not sure if you are meant to spend points, but when you have 4 in a attribute, you can get a specialization in it. And I usually say that you just gain a specialization for having 4 in it. You've pumped a lot of points into that attribute, you can get a specialization. The same applies to abilities, but obviously at character creation, you can't go above 3, so you can't specialize yet. So, specializations do one thing. If you can finagle that your role falls into the purview of your specialization, whatever it may be, your 10s, if you roll a 10, count as 2 successes instead of 1. Very basic thing here. Just to explain the way rolls are done, probably should have explained this at the beginning. I'll put it in the description, but I'll put it here as well. The way rolls are done is that you combine your dots in your attribute, the dots in your skill, and you roll a number of d10s equal to that. The target number, you only need 1 success to succeed, and the target number is determined by the storyteller. So if the target number is 8, your dice need to have 8 or higher. Very simple. But if you have a specialization, 10s count as 2 if the roll falls into the purview of your specialization. So for manipulation, I think we're going to go with seduction, which could fall under appearance or manipulation, depending, but seductive beauty would be the word for manipulation. But we'll go for seduction. That's not how you spell it, but we all know what I'm trying to say here. So she's a seductor. So next, we determine backgrounds, or advantages as they're known as. We'll start with our disciplines, which means we need to go find them for our clan. Disciplines are always found on the clan page, as you can see, as well as the clan weakness, which you put in last. So we'll get both of them over here. So for La Sombra, the La Sombra cast no reflections. They don't cast a reflection in the mirror, in water, polished surface, or in a rear view of a taxi cab. The image of the La Sombra just doesn't reflect. This is to do with a part of their lore and one of their disciplines. So they have Dominate, which is the ability to dominate another's mind. So they can, basically force you to do what they want. Obtenebration, which, if you know what that word means, you know what the power does. It's the power to control a primordial darkness known as the Abyss. It's a very powerful discipline. It's a supernatural darkness that nothing can see through. It's very powerful, so very jealously guarded by the La Sombra. Finally, Potence. Potence is your classic super strength. It's how vampires have super strength in this setting. Well, it's one of the ways they can have it. It essentially just gives you more strength and makes you a big badass. So, for our character, I don't think she has any potence. I don't think she uses super strength. I do think she has a point in Dominate and 2 points in Obtenebration. Now, the reason I'm only putting 3, you only get 3 points for your disciplines at character creation, because they are very, very powerful. So I think that she has she learned to dominate first, and then eventually, when she discovered her Obtenebration powers, decided, ooh, I like these. Now, you may be asking, well, okay, that's all fine and good. What does 1 and 2 dots in these do? Does it give you a power? Bingo, correct. Not every discipline, all but I think 3 of the disciplines give you powers at each level. There are 2 disciplines that don't exactly work that way, which are Necromancy and Thaumaturgy. They are the magic disciplines. They work a bit differently, but for the most part, every discipline except for Celerity, Potence, and Fortitude give you things when you put dots in them. Those 3 just give you bonuses when you put dots in them. So let's go have a look at level 1 of Dominate. So at level 1 of Dominate, you can command someone. You can lock eyes with someone and give a 1-word command which they must obey. It also must be clear and straightforward. So run, agree, fall, yawn, jump, laugh, surrender, stop, scream, stuff like this. Anything that's confusing just won't be followed and may actually just cause the power to not work. Also, you cannot order someone just to die. Self-preservation instincts, that whole thing. Now, you may be asking, oh, cool, where do I put that to remember it? Well, on this character sheet, there is a handy-dandy little tab called Powers, where you can add your discipline powers. So you would just copy and paste it from this book, and then you'd put it in here. Oh, sorry, that's where you'd put the name of the discipline, so Dominate, and the power name would go here. You'd put the level it is, and then you click this little button, and it gives you a nice description, a nice place for your description. So I would recommend you put in what is known as the system information. So essentially, this whole bit is not, this little bit here is all nice. It's fluff. It's to give you an idea of how it works and all that good stuff. Pardon me, I'm burpy today. What I'd recommend is put in the system information, what rolls you need to make, what the difficulty for those rolls is, how many successes that you might need, that whole thing. So, next up, so yeah, that's where you would put those things. So let's have a look at what our obtenebration powers would be. I'm doing this to give you an idea of even low level powers in this game are dangerous. So the first level power is Shadow Play. You gain control over ambient darkness and shadows. You can't create them, but you can overlap and stretch existing shadows to create patches of gloom. So essentially you can cover yourself in darkness, that whole thing. Mechanically, you spend a blood point. You drink blood. Blood powers your abilities. And you can cloak yourself in shadows. Doing this doing this gives you bonuses to stealth checks, as well as the difficulty of ranged weapon attacks against them is increased. So it's harder to shoot you, and you are easier to hide because you're constantly being covered in shadow. It makes you more intimidating as well as if you do make darkness and shadows go up to people, they actually get 1 die subtracted from their stamina for soaking and all that other things. The reason for this is that the darkness of the La Sombra is not natural. It's supernatural. It's physically there. If it was mere shadow, it wouldn't be nearly as dangerous. But it is like a physical presence. So as it states here, mortal ghouls and other air-breathing creatures reduced to zero stamina by strangling shadows begin to asphyxiate. Right? Makes sense. It's just oh wow, this is supernaturally potent. And that's the first level. The next power in it is Shroud of the Night, which allows the player to... it makes... Basically, you make a big cloud that completely obscures light and also obscures sound to a degree. It's a very unnerving experience. So you would roll whatever that is, and the cloud would appear, and it would give a bunch of negatives and penalties to enemies, and as a La Sombra, I believe you can see through it. But these are all the powers of the La Sombra. So, we'd put that in here. Combination disciplines are a thing from later books that you don't need to worry about, but essentially you can more or less be hey, these 3 disciplines all make 1 power. Fuck you. And they can be very, very powerful, but they're very hard to pick. So next up, we would pick our backgrounds. Now, backgrounds is not something I'm actively going to pick for this character since I'm just walking you through it, and I'd have to think about this character. But essentially, backgrounds can be anything from having a herd, which is a group of characters to feed from. Essentially, your character has a bunch of mortals that flock around them and they can feed from easier, to having contacts in Vampire or the other supernatural world that are powerful, to having status, so you are a prince or a primogen. They are essentially the nobility of vampires. So they're the big guys in charge. So you could be one of them. It could also be something as simple as you're rich. You're just really, really rich. And you get 5 points to spend on these. And you can spend them like 5 backgrounds at 1 or 1 background at 5. The more dots you put in the background, the more powerful that background is. And it is exponentially stacking. So 1 point in resources is, oh, you have enough money to support yourself with an apartment, a nice apartment, and have a little bit of spending cash. Nice. Means finance tests are a bit easier for you. 5 points in resources, you are possibly one of the richest men in the world. Like, you are a millionaire, at least. 1 point in herd is 3 people. 5 points in herd is, I think, 500. Regardless, it is a lot of exponentiation, and this really does come down to your character. Now, the only background that is very important to talk about is generation. Now, if you remember, I said you are a descendant of Cain. There are 13 generations of Cain, each one more removed from Cain the last, aka making them weaker. Now, you can pick the generation background to give yourself a higher generation. Now, what does this determine, you say? What would be the point of that? It gives you a higher blood pool to play with, so you can basically hold more blood. It allows you to spend more blood points in a turn if you spend enough points on it. So essentially, most vampires can only spend 1 blood per combat round, which is about 1 blood every 6 seconds, essentially. Might be 3 in this setting, can't quite remember. Which is not much. It means you can only really activate 1 power at a time. Older vampires can activate multiple powers at a time in one go, because they can spend so much of their blood, or their vitae. And the other big thing it determines is your attribute maximum. Now, as a 13th generation vampire, your maximum is the same as a normal human, right? 5. You can max that out with, you can go past that with things like potence and fortitude and celerity, which give you bonuses to your physical attributes, but your maximum is still 5. The higher generation you are, the higher your maximum is, all the way up to 10, which, as you can tell, is double the max a human could ever have. Now, generation's a big thing, though, because the higher generation you are, the more powerful your sire probably was, or maybe you did something that you weren't supposed to, and it's a big roleplay thing, and you should really discuss it with your storyteller before you decide to take it. Same with any background. If you're taking it at a particularly high level, discuss it with your storyteller. Don't just take it and throw it on them and be like, hey, I like the look of this. I like the idea of my character being really rich. What would that do for me? Because as much as being rich is useful in our world, and it can get you a lot of places with mortals, vampires don't care about money at all. They're immortal. Why would they give a fuck about money, is the best way to put it. Now, next up is the virtues of the system. These you get 7 points for, and they're quite important. They are your conscience, your self-control, and your courage. Now, in this system, vampires can go into a frenzy. Frenzying is losing yourself to what's known as the beast. It's your predatory instincts. To resist that, you make a self-control check. To not do it. So it's important to have these high, but don't think that mechanically you have to make them high. Frenzying can be a good thing sometimes because it makes for interesting character dynamics. So I think for this character, she has very high self-control. So we'll spend 3 of her 7 points, because they all start at 1, on self-control. So she has 4 left. I think she has no conscience, really. She has I genuinely think she has a 1 in conscience. She is not a good person. But yeah, so that leaves me with 4 left, of which I will put into her courage. She is a courageous person. She will do things that she wants to do, consequences be damned. Now, you might be asking now, okay, what do these determine, beyond just being things that you roll in-game? Well, they determine your humanity and your starting willpower. Your humanity is how much of your human side you're still holding on to. Because vampires aren't human. They've lost their humanity. They are inhuman. But that doesn't mean a lot of vampires aren't still trying to hold on to it. The average humanity for your average person is 7. That's what a normal human would have in humanity if they were to turn into a vampire night 1. A 9 and 10, 8, 9, and 10 is like, 8 is like a really, really good person. Like, Robin Williams would probably have an 8 in humanity because he was a very kind man. 9 is you're starting to get to the point where it's like, okay, this person might be a bit of a saint. So I'm trying to think of someone who's like a bit of a saint in real life, just very kind. I know what number 10. I know my thing for number 10. Bob Ross would probably have a 9 humanity, just incredibly kind, very nice. You know, he's seen some bad stuff, but he has a 9 humanity. 10 humanity is like Mr. Rogers level of a good person. It's just like this person is unreasonably wholesome to the point where you lose humanity for doing certain actions, giving into the beast, stuff like that. At 10 humanity, you can get put down to 9 by simply having selfish thoughts, which is like, oh, wow, that is genuinely not even something most humans can do. So, yeah, most vampires have about 7 or 6. A lot of older vampires have 4 or 5. But yeah, so this character has 5 because the way you determine it is combining your conscience and self-control. Next up is your willpower, which is directly just how much courage you have. As I said, willpower is like resisting certain things as well as spending your temporary points. So after this, we've only got 2 more things to do. 1, determine our generation. And because I haven't taken any background points, I'll just put in we're the 13th, which means we have 1 blood per turn, a maximum pool of 10, and 5 as our maximum trait. So essentially, as you can see here, this is how you would mark your blood pool. You would, each one of these rows is 10, so you would mark it up here, and when you spend a point, you take it down by 1. So on, so on, so on, till you have no blood left, and you go murder someone to eat them. So, oh, my neck. So, next up, the final thing that you would do in the game is essentially, name your character, write a backstory, that whole stuff, and then you would spend what are known as freebie points. You get 15 of them, and you can buy merits, which are like special bonuses that your character can have beyond even being a vampire. So these could be things like you're really well known amongst the Camarilla for being really nice and everyone likes you, or you're physically really big and really strong. Like kind of like advantages and disadvantages in Anima for those who've watched my system, or a bit like feats in D&D, just a special thing about your character. But you can also take flaws, a total of 7 points worth of them, because each merit and flaw has a cost associated with them. Flaws are negatives about your character, and these can be things like you're hated amongst the Camarilla, or you'll have like an atrophied arm when you were embraced, so you only have 1 arm, or maybe it's that you're like mentally a bit slow. I believe that is another flaw. Or they can be supernatural for both. So supernatural merits can include stuff like you have no aura. Like an aura is like it's exactly as it sounds in any system. It's like your physical soul manifest that like people with the Auspex power can see. If they can't see that, they can't determine a lot about you, and that's really like, oh fuck me. Or it could be like another supernatural flaw could be that another supernatural merit could be something along the lines of you start with an extra discipline. You have 4 clan disciplines instead of 3. Now, the reason you would want that is to do with experience points, which I'll explain at the very end. Supernatural flaws can be things like you're repulsed by garlic, or you can't cross running water. All the classic vampiric weaknesses. They could be your supernatural flaws. Or it could be stuff like you're literally cursed, and like your life is just a shit show, which is always fun. By the way, you would get 15 points to spend, and the cost for those is located at the very end of the sheet, right on page 90. So right here, so you can spend 5 of them to get a dot in an attribute, 7 to get a dot in a discipline. Backgrounds are 1-to-1. Virtue, humanity, and willpower are all 1-to-1. So yeah, you know, you get this, like, you can spend those, and then once you're done there, you're done with everything. The only thing left would be experience costs. So there's a cost for experience. Everything has a cost of experience in the game, which is right here. So yeah, it's right here. So you get experience costs. So like if you want to buy a new discipline, it's 10. If you want to buy a new ability or a new path for necromancy or thaumaturgy, which is paths are essentially the type of magic you do with that. It's an interesting little system. Now that's how you get how you buy the starting dot in those things. To increase an ability from, like, let's say 1 to 2, you spend whatever your current rating is times something. So for attributes, it's, you know, 1 times 4 is you'd spend 4 to get it to 2, 8 to get it to 3, and 12 to get it to 4, and so on and so forth for spending them. Now, here's where the kicker is. Disciplines are the most expensive thing in the game, outright. So your clan disciplines only cost your current rating times 5. So, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 to get to a full 5. No, 20 to get to a full 5 in any of your disciplines. Any discipline that is not from your clan is current rating times 7, which is very expensive. So, like, you know, 7, 14, 21, 28. Yeah, so it'd be like, to get like a maxed out discipline not from your clan, it's like 28. So the merit additional clan discipline means that you have 4 disciplines that only cost you a maximum of 20 to max out. Now, in this system, you should expect to be getting from most storytellers like 2 experience a session. Maybe 3 or 4 at most. I'm a bit nicer. I tend to hand out 4 or 5 just because I like my characters being a bit powerful. Also, I require training time in my sessions, so if I don't give the players time to train, they don't get to fucking learn it. So, that is the character creation for Vampire the Masquerade. As you can see, here's my recording. I'll go back to the thing. So, this is how you would make the character. From here, it would be up to the player to make what they want. So, I thank you very much for watching this video, if you have. Again, I will get back to the anima one, but when I'm in the mood for anima. So you may just see random character creation guides from me every now and again. You might not, so if you guys want, anyone's interested, I could go over Vampire the Masquerade lore with you guys all. Obviously, it'd be in this method, so I'd have an image up in the background, probably something to do with the current thing I'm talking about. And, you know, I could research and look up a bunch of stuff for you if you wanted. Let me know in the comments if you want that. Beyond that, folks, I hope this guide was useful. Goodbye.